Hey everyone, this is Julian Torres with Behind Company Line. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Kevin Greene, Chairman and CEO of Tassat, the leading provider of blockchain-based B2B payment and financial solutions for banks and their corporate clients. Kevin, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm so excited to chat with you, not only as a leader of the blockchain space and kind of what that industry is advancing toward. That now I'm so excited to kind of get your insights and even maybe some predictions from you, but also you have a really unique background to our audience, being that you were chairman of Tassat and then became the CEO, which we've seen before on the show, but it's always interesting to kind of uncover and unpack the different scenarios and when that situation arises and how that transition comes and where you lead the company from there. But before we get into all that good stuff, what were you doing before you became the CEO of Tassat?
Sure. I started my career after graduate school as a management consultant with McKinsey and Company, financial services. I left there and started a boutique investment bank. I've run a pension consulting business. I basically founded and built a number of companies.
Yeah. In that process of building, what in particular got you excited about Tassat and what, the company was doing, the technology that they were building?
Sure. So myself and my fellow investors became aware of blockchain technology in kind of 2015, 2016 timeframe. And we had a couple of observations. One was that the IT infrastructure that runs the entire world right now was built 50 years ago. Companies like Intel, Microsoft systems, et cetera.
Yeah.
And blockchain technologies, this is a superior database, much more secure, much more efficient, et cetera. We're very familiar with financial services. So we saw an application in U.S. financial services. And so the second observation was that we felt that putting payments and other corporate banking services on the blockchain would be a tremendous opportunity. And I think we're seeing that. We're seeing a fundamental transformation of technological infrastructure in the U.S. banking industry. So it's fun to be part of that. And we founded Tassat in October of 2017.
Yeah. It's so incredible to see the transition from these huge institutions into this new technology. And I'm so curious, what are the conversations like going into, I guess, convincing these institutions to make this transition? How has the conversation started? And then also when you're going through the conversation, how do you ensure that this whole onboarding is completed and done so in a way that will be beneficial to the business? I'm sure there's a lot of involvement in there. And how do you kind of block and tackle those pieces to achieve the outcome you want?
Sure. So going into it, whenever you're doing something new, the good news is it's new. The
Yeah.
bad news is it's new. So we start just by talking about the limitations with the existing information technology infrastructure. And then we talk about the benefits of blockchain. So as I mentioned earlier, much more secure,
Yeah.
much more efficient, very flexible. There's just so many things you can do once you have a blockchain technology based infrastructure. So we talk about that. And then we talk about the benefits for banks' clients. So what's happened is in the retail sector, through Venmo, PayPal, and services like that, people have become used to real-time payments around the clock. In the corporate world, they don't exist. So we kind of say, look, we should certainly have in the corporate world what you have in the retail world.
Mhm.
The difference is that higher requirements for security, privacy, and particularly compliance with U.S. banking regulations. And that's what we bring to the table. When it comes to onboarding,
Yeah.
we start with the clients, or let me say, we start with the bank's clients, corporate customers, what their needs are. We try to satisfy those needs. And we give the banks the tools to satisfy those needs, right? Real-time
Yeah.
payments,
Yeah.
highly secure, around the clock.
Yeah. And what was the limitation of the pre-existing technology? You discussed it with Bill 50 years ago and going through this transition. And now, like you said, and I think it's completely true, is as consumers, our expectations for payments is now almost real-time transactions. What was the limitations of the previous technology, and how does blockchain and transitioning into this new Web3 technology speed that process up?
Yeah. So this is something that people wouldn't know unless they actually worked within the bank. But right now in the US, well, payment infrastructure is only expected to work from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. So that's 40 hours.
Yeah.
Every one of those payment platforms, it doesn't matter which vendor they're using, breaks down once a week. Could break down for 5 minutes, 5 hours, could break down for a day or two. So that's existing infrastructure. It's very vulnerable to hacking and to fraud. Okay. And if you want to adapt it or change it, takes a long time, costs a lot of money. So those are the challenges that all the banks face. So we show up with a platform that operates around the clock, rarely breaks down, highly secure, very difficult, if not impossible to hack, and very easy to adapt. Another example is banks may want to do things like AI or data analytics. Very difficult to do that with traditional legacy technology. A lot easier if you're operating on the blockchain. So that's the contrast. It's really night and day. This is a once in a generation transformational technology innovation. It was not incremental, it's not baby steps. This is a big leap.
Yeah. Yeah. And what in particular, is it just being able to label an index or I guess track that transaction and kind of have that blockchain to be able to reference? Is that the difficulty is like the labeling of the previous data, but this in essence, I guess, get labeled when a transaction's completed or requested, right? There's then a chain of events that occurred to be able to track it. Is that the general limitation, or was it a multitude of things that we're seeing being improved with this new layer of technology?
It's a multiple of things. Again, in the corporate world, when you try to make a payment, you have to answer a lot of data.
Yeah.
Then when I send you money, I don't know if you got it. I might have to, and I can only do it between 9 to 5. So I've got, you call me and say, where's my money? Or I call you and say, did you get your money? It's very vulnerable to hacking. So that's the current world. Our world is real-time payments. The moment I send it to you, within seconds, I know you received it. I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's highly secure. I can do it around the clock. So it's all these things combined are very compelling.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about in a second here. I want to put a little pin in it, but in terms of the future of what this ability is going to allow businesses to do, but taking a step back in your career and thinking about the conception of Tassat and kind of this whole, typically what we see on the show is founder stories where they had an idea, they conceive the idea, then they go through this epic of a founder journey. But it seems like you came at this with a group of individuals. And so how do you go about when you do find yourself having a network, you see a problem or a solution needed to be provided, or maybe a different layer of technology into an incumbent that just was outdated? How do you go about building a company with a group of individuals? And then when you transition kind of leadership, what does that change to the culture of the company, and how do you go through that evolution? Other than maybe a typical evangelist founder story, but this one seems a little bit more strategic and very thoughtfully planned out and executed. Tell us a little bit about that experience and how different it is from the kind of predictable founder experience. Not predictable, but I guess the one that we're all used to and accustomed to.
So I'd say it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
We definitely had a strategy going in, but I'm absolutely an evangelist. Make no mistake about it. And I think that's actually a big part of what, I know it's a big part of what motivates our entire team. We have the largest economy in the world, in the United States. And in the developed world, probably the most antiquated payment and financial services infrastructure in the developed world.
Yeah.
So we're very much evangelists, and we think we're the vanguard of helping to modernize that existing infrastructure. It's important to the banks. It's important to the businesses they serve. And these businesses serve hairdressers, pizza shop owners, machine tool operators, all sorts of different companies. So we really believe we're doing something that's really good for the world. And that really matters. In terms of putting a team together, I've now done this for 3 decades. It's what I love to do. I have a vision of something I want to create and organize it for people to achieve it. And just, it's a great thing to do. And we're doing it in an area, in a technology and in an industry, which is just enormous. So that's all very exciting. And we got 86, almost 90 employees, and they're equally motivated every day by the vision.
Yeah. Yeah. As a founder yourself, thinking back on your journey, what advice would you give to a founder who's building their network, building teams? How do you ensure that you're building the right team around you? And then secondly, how do you maintain the motivation and the culture as your team expands past 50 employees? It's really hard to keep in the know of who's working in what department and keep that cohesive culture. But I'm sure you have some strategies to reinstill that. So yeah, I guess twofold question there. Sorry to hit you with that, but yeah, what advice did you give a founder who's building a network and building teams? And then secondly, how do you maintain culture as your team grows?
Sure. So first of all, you have to have a very clearly articulated mission and purpose.
Yeah.
So ours, we describe it as empowering banks to compete and win in the new digital economy. And as I mentioned earlier, in the process of doing that, this helps those banks serve companies better. Those companies can be better employers. So it really drives the entire economy. That's pretty exciting. In terms of putting a team together, values are everything, everything. So we look for high talent, high integrity, high energy people and team players. You got to be a team player. Teams win everything. So
Yeah.
this is something I had the good fortune of learning early in my career. It's something I've done throughout my career. And you basically just go out and find the right people. The other thing is, if you really want to be something outstanding, you need to have outstanding talent. So one of the things that I explain to people is, if you want to be mediocre, there are millions of companies to work for. If you really want to be outstanding, interestingly enough, there are very few places that outstanding people can feel at home. So every business I've ever built, I've tried to create an environment where truly outstanding people, outlier, like people will go, that's an unusual person. They're like strange. Those are the kind of people I try to make feel at home, because it's those outliers who achieve outstanding things. But again, I come back to values. They have to be driven. They have to be outliers, but they have to have high integrity, high energy, and team players. And if they don't have those qualities, don't hire them. If you hire somebody like that and find out they've got the wrong qualities, hate to say it, separate from them quickly. There'll be plenty of homes I think there are plenty of homes where people without those qualities can migrate to.
How do you evaluate those qualities without having the experience that you had, or what structurally do you do to evaluate those outliers? Because I totally understand that sometimes the people with the most outrageous background coming from a multitude of different things develop such a keen skill set that may on paper not be so clear, but I'm sure there's an evaluation process that really it extracts that experience that could be valuable. How do you evaluate them?
Yeah. So I'll say this will seem unusual to say. We don't hire for skills per se. We hire for talent. We hire for integrity. We hire for team play. They can learn the skills, or maybe they bring some of the skill. But if you hire talent, integrity, and energy and teamwork, they figure it out. So how do you do that? One is, it helps that I've got a lot of experience. And what experience means that I've made a lot of mistakes. I've made every mistake imaginable. But what you do is you first put together a leadership team that has those qualities. Birds of a feather flock together. So you start with leaders that have those qualities. And you charge them with going out and finding the next level, have those qualities, and then they are at the next level. What ends up happening is you have an immune system in the organization.
Yeah.
That people who fit in that organization join, thrive, run fast. And people who don't fit, they self-select eventually.
Yeah. I love how the foundation of the company is so important in not only with the first initial build and growth, but also with bringing on new team members. Thinking on just the technology side of what you're building and the capabilities that it has, and what I can think about a multitude of benefits, but in your eyes, what are the biggest value adds to the businesses that you're serving? And in terms of the technology, how is that transition process? Because I can't imagine it's easy to say it's like coding in one language or going from a no-code software into maybe developing with something specific in mind for a particular reason. But Yeah. I got two questions. Again, what are the benefits that the companies are seeing? And then how do you transition technology that's legacy into something that's new?
Sure. So on the technology side, that's actually relatively easy because we do not require that a bank rip out their existing infrastructure. We build on top of a legacy platform. So actually the technology integration we can do in 30 to 45 days. That's pretty easy. Okay. Might seem ironic to say. The harder part is, I mean, we are working with banks, so regulations, risk management, operations. But actually the most important is what we bring to the table is so radically different and so radically better than what they've been delivering to their clients so far that we actually have to hold their hands in some ways and walk them through the first two opportunities.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening, so value to their clients, again, safety, security, instantaneous around the clock. That's great. Then we built smart contracts, which is programmable money. Nobody else can do this. And then for the bank, though, what ends up happening is that clients love them. They do more business with them. They deepen relationships. They grow more deposits. They can add new clients. So it really is a force multiplier for the bank.
Yeah.
Again, I come back to my first statement, which is the good news is it's new. The bad news is it's new.
Yeah.
And anything that's new, you have to be an evangelist. We're still in the educational system, a lot of education, a lot of learning, et cetera. But what happens is that you can imagine once a client has all this functionality around the clock, they don't go back to the bank and say, hey, could you slow me down again? Like, I don't like doing it around the clock. Can you limit me to 9 to 5? So when the banks start to see that, which is how much their clients love them, what they can do with their clients, the banks become believers and they carry the mission forward for us.
Yeah. And how does it work mechanically? Is it if I'm a client of a bank, it is a part of my asset converted to digital assets, and then I'm able to transactions using the platform or using its capabilities? And then with the smart contracts, is that for, say, if you want to do a loan, so you kind of have a smart contract to give you a certain amount of lending ability, and then you pay back that smart contract, and then it's transitioned back to the bank. Yeah, I'm just trying to think from a user capability standpoint, there must be so many things that I might not be aware of that's happening on the back end, but allows me to do all these things, like you mentioned, real-time access, security and privacy, and all the things that encompass technology.
Yeah. It's a great question. Actually, it's a wonderful question. For the customer, they don't care about blockchain technology. They don't care about the technology.
Yeah.
And in fact, they never interface with it. What they can do is just in their existing deposit account, they have next to a digital wallet that then allows them to do things real time around the clock. They can do it instantaneously in seconds. It's really very easy for them. So there's not much of a change to the consumer. It's very easy for the consumer. And then when it comes to smart contracts, again, we've made that so user friendly. So for example, if I've got a company, I have a customer, I can send them a smart contract that says, you owe me $1 million. If you pay me 10 days early, I'll give you a 5% discount. That customer then can click on, say, okay, I'll pay 10 days early. I want to schedule payment.
Yeah.
They click off and they're done. They now get that discount and that the payment is going to happen on whatever the date they'd specified. Just by saying that, you can imagine all the receivables, payable staff that go away.
Yeah.
You don't have to be chasing down receivables or payable. So it's all about convenience and ease for the customer. And they don't really care whether it's on blockchain or SQL Server or Oracle. They don't care.
Yeah.
And we make sure that they don't care about it.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't care until there's a problem. Then they're trying to figure out what you're doing wrong. Right.
That's why we operate for more than 3 years without any problems.
I love that. I love that. Tell us a little bit more about the traction of Tassat. How many companies are you working with? How many banks are you working with? How many clients have you served so far? And then what's exciting about this year and the traction that you're seeing leading into it?
So as of the end of January, we surpassed $1 trillion in transactions.
Wow. Congrats.
$1 trillion.
Yeah.
So,
Heavy.
and the progression has been, if I go back 3 years ago, 48 billion, 247 billion in 21, 538 billion in 22. and 158 billion in January of this year in 1 month. So in 1 month, we did almost as much as we did all of 2 years ago. So our business is really growing rapidly. We've gone from being in one bank to now we're in 6 banks, and we've got a pipeline of about 60 banks.
Wow.
So it's really going very quickly. And we've just begun to roll out our digital interbank network and our smart contracts. So we're pretty optimistic. This year, we should easily exceed $1 trillion in transactions just this year.
Yeah.
We project probably about $1.5 trillion. That'll be a triple over last year. And this is an enormous market. I mean, it's trillions upon trillions of dollars a year.
Yeah. And what does that mean? Obviously, the numbers sound substantial and extremely impressive. But what does that mean for a company, from a company standpoint? Where does a company essentially receive the value from the client? Where do you make the money? And is it the transaction fees? Is it hosting it on the platform? Just, I guess founder to founder, I'm curious about where the money's made.
So we have a base monthly subscription fee supplemented by a transaction fee and certain fees based on balances that get attracted because of our platform. So it's very much a transaction driven SaaS type model. These are multi-year contracts with the banks.
Yeah.
It's a very attractive business.
Yeah. And it also seems like the incentives are aligned well with your company to better the capability of transactions. Not only does the technology have to work better, but you have to have a high bar of, I'm sure, clients that you're working with and customers that have a high transaction volume. So did you always land on that, or did you have to pivot a few times to figure out the business model? And what was that process like?
Well, actually, despite our success, we got 20 different use cases we're working on with a variety of banks.
Yeah.
But we're still in the probing and experimentation stage because the platform itself is so robust. You digitize payments, you put them on smart contracts. There are literally, we think, hundreds of potential applications. We've got about 20 use cases we're working on right now with banks. We're at different levels of development, some deployed, some going to be deployed. So I'd say while we're having a lot of success, we're still very early in what we're doing. And we're still kind of experimenting and working with the banks to learn what the customers want and customizing our solutions. And as I said earlier, we're still involved in the educational process, educating the banks and educating their customers. So we're really at the very beginning of what will ultimately achieve.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face today?
Just, we're doing something new. Education. One of our salespeople said the biggest problem is every time we have a meeting, there are new people we have to meet and educate.
Yeah.
So banks are structured to avoid risk,
right?
To be very careful and cautious, and we respect that. That's why everything we do is with an existing U.S. banking regulation. That's why we use private permission blockchain to make it secure, private, safe.
Yeah.
So they're cautious entities. They should be cautious because they've been entrusted with people's money and deposits.
Yeah.
And it just takes time. Just gotta spend the time educating them, be patient. We're a technology company though, right? Because we want everything to happen yesterday. My saying is, why put off to today what I could have done yesterday?
Yeah.
Having said that, we have to be really patient with our clients because we can't be too far ahead of them.
Yeah. Yeah. If everything goes though, what's the long-term vision?
Oh man, it's just, as I said earlier, we think there's a mega cycle of the deployment of blockchain technology around the world. That's a mega cycle. That's going to play out over the next 20 years. Within that, there's another mega cycle of modernizing the U.S. banking industry.
Yeah.
We're at the very beginning of that. This is a 10, 20-year effort.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I have some rapid fire questions I'd love to ask you just for our founders out here. What's the hardest part about your job?
I'm sorry?
What's the hardest part about your job?
I really enjoy what I'm doing so much. It's hard to find something. As an entrepreneur, you're always looking around the corner. You're always thinking about what could blow up the company. What could somebody do that is really difficult? For us, we're in a heavily regulated industry. So you always worry about the regulators do something which make your business much more difficult. So I'd say that's the thing I'm most concerned about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. Want to be rapid.
No worries. Next question is, as a CEO, what do you expect in the transition of your business for your responsibility to change? What do you stop having to spend so much more time on and then start to allocate more time towards?
Yeah. So I've been an entrepreneur for more than 3 decades. I'm proud of the fact that I've worked myself out of every job I've ever had, not because I don't care, but because I'm pretty good at developing people. And if
Yeah.
I'm not developing people, if I'm not developing my successor, then I'm a failure. So with it, as an entrepreneur, you start out stuffing envelopes, looking at the envelope, putting the stamp on it. And over time, you're doing while you do high level things, right?
Right.
And then over time, you keep on forming out the things that are not as high value added. And you bring in people who are extraordinarily talented and you just let them run, you let them go
Yeah.
for it. So, so that's my job, to eventually
Yeah.
work myself out of my current job.
I love that. I love that. What, if you had more time in the world, obviously time's limited, but if you had more time, what would you spend more time on, whether it's within the business or outside of the business?
I've got a wonderful wife and 4 children, so that they get all that extra time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Another thing is what do you know now as an entrepreneur that you wish you knew 30 years ago or when you first started out that you think could have helped accelerate some of the growth or some of the learning pain that you went through? Advice, I guess, for other founders who are earlier in their career.
So when I was young, I believed in my leadership skills enough that I thought I could take any raw material and turn them into a big success. I found out the hard way that it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So now I focus a lot on finding great talent and motivating them.
Yeah.
So that goes back to talent, integrity, values, teamwork. I always believed in that, but I thought I could build it more than I can. It went better off finding people with those qualities, creating an environment for them, and they'll run so fast, you can't even imagine it.
Yeah.
And the toughest thing for any entrepreneur is when it's not working with somebody, making that decision early and
Yeah.
not waiting too long. So
Yeah.
those are tough decisions because you're a compassionate person, you care about people. But if it's not a good fit, just make the decision. It's not good for them. It's not good for the company. Move on.
Yeah. 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 That's good advice. If you weren't working on Tassat, what would you be working on?
Oh, something else like it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most?
Oh my goodness. That's a long list.
Yeah.
I've had the good fortune of having met a lot of great business leaders and entrepreneurs. And I just learned as much as I could from them and just be a sponge. So they all have certain skills, certain capabilities. I try to learn from all of them. And then I think most people in my stage of their career will tell you they're kind of a composite of every great leader and mentor they've ever had.
Yeah. I love that. I love the composite thing. And it really speaks to the entrepreneurial mindset of extracting value from anything you do, everything you do, anyone you meet, because you never know when that's going to come back to actually pay back its dividends. I guess last little bit, as a founder yourself, what do you today currently spend most of your time thinking about? Is it building product? Is it hiring? Or is it servicing your customers and your clients and building new relationships?
Building relationships, hiring people, making sure that people are properly focused. And the biggest thing that we haven't touched on is the importance of listening.
Yeah.
Like if I could teach people one thing, it's listen, listen, listen. And listen not for what the words are, but for what's being said.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
and always remaining open-minded. You never know who will come up with an idea you didn't think of, and try to the people around you to be good listeners too.
yeah.
We have a natural bias to hear what we want to hear.
Yeah.
You got to listen for what's actually being said.
Yeah.
But that can be very different from the words being used.
Wow. That's the heavy thing to end on. And I know we're at the end of the episode here, but that was perfect to solidify it. Last little bit, Kevin, is I always like to give my guests a chance to give us your plugs. Where can we find and be a part of Tassat, its journey? What's the LinkedIn's, the website, Twitter's? Where can we find you and be a fan? And if we're a potential client, where can we go to work with you?
The best is the website, Tassat.com. That's the best I'm going to do for you. I know we've got Instagram and all sorts of social media. It's all got Tassat. And I have a good person who worries about all that.
I love that. I love that. Well, Kevin, such a pleasure chatting with you today, not only learning about your background, your experience, but also strategically how you view companies, the building process. And I think the most important things for founders to focus on is team and people and building that whole ecosystem for people to be successful. So such great things that we chatted about today, and I'm sure we could chat about more, but I really appreciate you being on the show, and I really hope you enjoyed yourself. And thank you again for joining us here.
Well, thank you, Julian. This is a great podcast. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you for asking me so many probing and difficult questions. I appreciate it. Great podcast.
I love that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.